Welcome to Kim Talks Books. I'm Kim Hayden, your host. As we step into the quiet spaces between the lines, focusing on the vibrant author's journey, we'll explore the dedication, the inspiration, and the unique perspectives that these authors bring to their craft, offering listeners the profound reader's reward of discovering fresh narratives. So settle in because our literary adventure with tomorrow's acclaimed writers begins now. Alrighty, welcome back to Kim Talks Books. It's all about the journey here and what can we learn from each other? I love the fact that in today's world we have opportunities that are now no longer the top 1% of 1%. We're starting to see that everyday heroes, people who are fighting it out on on their own turf are bringing impact and change, and they're going that next step further. They're writing it down. They're documenting it, and they're leaving a legacy of their best thoughts, their best practices, their in their wisdom, right? So, today I am really excited to jump into this conversation. Our pre-conversation showed me that our guest today, Dana, is also a recovering real estate agent. Actually, she's still in the trenches, but she has lots of wisdom to share, and she is looking at the next generation of her life, her next journey. And we're going to get a peek at that today, starting with her journey as an author. Welcome to the show, Dana.
Thank you so much for having me.
This is going to be fun because I think we're they say great minds think alike.
Mhm.
And I have a feeling that we have very similar kind of baselines as to
Yeah.
how we treat people, how we attract people into our circle. Can you give us a little bit of a speaking of baselines? Can you give us a little bit of a overview as to who is Dana? Where are you coming from? Give us a little bit of kind of your past experiences so that we can bring it together and discuss the books.
Yeah, absolutely. I always say I'm a truth seer and a truth teller. From the time I was a very young girl, I unfortunately experienced abuse for the first 45 years of my life in childhood and then in my first marriage. So it was very important to me for my own sanity as I was growing up just to validate myself because I was being told that what I felt wasn't right and that what I experienced wasn't what I was really experiencing. Everything was being negated. My reality was being manipulated with other people's narratives about what my life was, who I was, even, and what I could and should be. So when I finally at 44, 45 years old said no to all of that, and said yes to myself for once, I realized that I was the one who was in control if I chose to be, and I was choosing myself finally, and that's the point that everything changed, and that's when I realized this is such an important thing for we, especially as women, for men too, for anybody that has ever felt trapped in a life they didn't feel like was their own, anybody that's ever felt unease, um, depression, anxiety. I think a lot of it has to do with living lives or going along with expectations that don't reflect who we truly are inside.
I completely and 110. First of all, I would have never put you over 40. Like it just, yeah, I wouldn't have.
I will be 50 this year.
Oh, congratulations! This
Well,
you're
thank you.
entering. You're entering. I'm 56, and you're entering a 15-year stint where it's your time, and you have the knowledge, the grace, and everything to start really driving this home. I myself came from a fairly traumatic childhood, and
Yeah.
I was blessed with a court-appointed therapist that was amazing. And I was talking to her a few years ago about the shift in my journey in 2014 and moving into this. And a few, I think it was right during COVID. Um, I just after I had gone down to Wichita, visited my mother. She had had a stroke, and I had gone by to speak to to my therapist, and I'd left her one of the books that I'd been part of and everything, and I said, "I think I found my voice. I found my voice. I love interviewing people who are making impact. I'm not I'm not a keynote, and I'm okay with that, right? I've got too many squirrels running around in my head. I got too many ideas. I got too many things I want to get. And keynotes are very special because they are very succinct and on point, and they're able to really deliver
Yeah.
high impact, right, content.
Mhm.
And she said to me, Kimberly, you're entering your wisdom years, and it is your responsibility to share that wisdom as far and fast as possible. And then she shared how during her wisdom years, she's in her 80s now, how she lectured and shared based on my case. So I love the fact that you're entering your 50s because this is your time to shine and impact. So let's talk about impact. Let's go into the books. Let's say you have one book that's continually charting, and that's called
Yeah.
Gasping for Air. But this is actually a trilogy, Gasping for Air, Choking on Shame, and Rising from the Ashes. So let's first talk about the author's journey of knowing that this is going to be a trilogy or even just getting that first book out. Where were you at and how did you move through this?
Yeah, I never knew there was gonna be a trilogy. Honestly, it was also during COVID when I one of the things I said no to was that first marriage where I was experiencing various abuses and domestic violence. I decided to divorce him, and within a week or 2 after I made that decision and consulted with an attorney, we went into the shelter in place. So I was locked in a house with him, and I was having to keep a record for my sake because I honestly thought he might fulfill one of his wishes, that I would no longer be. I was keeping a record in a notebook and keeping this notebook hidden under the couch cushion in the basement just in case something happened, because there were various things happening, not always very direct and aggressive. To give an example, I did not know that he had used Pledge, the wood furniture cleaner, on our wooden stairs to the basement one day when I was outside trying to enjoy the garden and not be in the house. And when I went in the house, I took a tumble right down those stairs, the first step. So there were things happening that I thought I need to make sure that somebody finds some evidence if something happens to me, that there is nothing in this house that is by accident. Anyway, long and short of it, when I had all this time during COVID, like everyone else, we're all at home trying to figure out what to do, and you can only clean so much. I began to expand these stories from my journal, these little entries, into the full stories. And after it was all said and done, and we finally were divorced that fall, I realized, at least I felt, I had an obligation to sort of warn people about what happens when you stay in these relationships because I think there are a million reasons people stay, but one of the biggest things for we as women is that we feel like it's the right thing to do, especially if there are children involved. We don't want to break up the family. We don't want to, we feel selfish if we want to go and pursue our own joys and passions and live our lives. But the kicker for me was that I had actually become very ill. I developed a lung syndrome. That's why you hear the scratchiness in my voice. That's actually a lung syndrome that's like having COPD and fibromyalgia all together. And it was caused by extraordinary levels of cortisol, the stress hormone, running through my system from living in fight or flight mode for so long. And I thought, well, I've heard stress can really kill you. So I wanted to let people know that you might think you're staying and you're doing the right thing, but you're doing yourself a disservice. You are killing yourself from the inside out. So if they don't succeed at it, you might be doing yourself that favor. And that's something I don't think people realize. They understand stress and anxiety and stomach aches and migraines as a result of stress, but they don't realize that you can actually develop much more serious illnesses as a result of living with chronic stress. So that's why I released Gasping for Air. The other two books, honestly, were a surprise to everybody because it was just that Gasping for Air was so well received. And still, as you said, it is still the book. It was supposed to be the only book, but I think so many women sadly are resonating with my experiences that there was a demand to know, well, how do you end up in a relationship like that? For me, it was clearly my childhood. I was primed to, perpetuate that generational trauma, that unhealed trauma that we just continue on with. But then I realized I was also the cycle breaker, or at least I was the one that decided the cycle was going to be broken as much as I could. Obviously, we'll see the results with my son as he has his own family and grows up. But that would be my third book, Rising from the Ashes, because I did want to have a book that kind of closes everything up and brings it all full circle with basically everything I've learned thus far. Because I like to think I'm a quick learner and I'm always looking to understand my experiences. And thankfully, I have a degree in journalism. I studied psychology, so I'm able to communicate those things in a way that anybody that reads my books can understand. And I feel that I've done that, and that's my little impact for readers. But now I'm on platforms like yours where I can speak up about it as well, because some people find that it's easier to listen to, their media resources and so forth. And I'm now speaking. I'm going to be speaking at a very big stage this October at the Chicago Women's Expo, and some other summits coming up, because I think these are messages women need to hear. They need to know they're not alone. They need to know that they need somebody to tell them that it's okay, to give them permission to live their lives on their terms, and to tell them that they don't have to accept what is expected of them or accept or tolerate mistreatment.
I want to go back to the pledge incident.
Mhm.
You said that these types of things were happening, like this passive type of underlying sinister approach,
Uh-huh.
right, to your well-being. We've heard people in leadership, we've heard media. It is a common byline. Women are being dramatic,
Mm.
right? We're right?
Yep.
Why do you believe more women don't speak up earlier?
Fear. We're afraid. Women are afraid, just like I was. Why didn't I speak up? Because I knew nobody would believe me. Because when you're dealing with somebody, we can talk about narcissists. It's a word that's thrown around a lot. An abuser, anybody that is capable of doing what they do to other people, it's with intention and it's with, malignant purpose. They are also, while they're doing what they're doing to you, they are spreading a narrative behind your back with your family, with your friends, with at your son's school, everywhere they go, that, you're unstable, you're crazy, you're overly emotional, you're too sensitive, you're not it was a misunderstanding, a misperception. Just as they gaslight you, they gaslight everybody else, and they're very convincing. And so you have no credibility because this person is out there. I always liken it to Ted Bundy, the serial killer. Everybody said, oh, he was so charming and handsome. And his girlfriend's little girl, 7 years old, absolutely adored him because he was apparently father of the year when it came to her. Yet he was out doing what he was doing to women, luring them and committing these horrific crimes. These are not people like everybody thinks, like I went out on the street and found Chucky. I'm not into, disheveled butcher knife wielding, striped sweater weirdos. It's not my thing. I don't think anybody has that type, but you see these people out in the world like the Ted Bundys, they're the good guys, they're charming, they're generous, they're charitable, and behind closed doors, it's a different story. So who's going to believe you? Who's going to believe you? And if you do speak up about it and you do sound as crazy as they say you are, then you're just almost validating the claims that they're making, even though it's lies. But you're also fearing the consequence because what if they find out that you expose them? what happens to you then? Something worse?
Yeah.
Or is it going to be the calm before the storm? You don't know. Are they going to run off with your children? Mine tried to, basically kidnap our son from me and even threatened that I would never see my son ever again. They were going to run off to Mexico or whatever. He was spewing all kinds of plans, but it's fear. It's fear.
Yeah.
And it's so terrifying because they hold you. I always say it's kind of like living with one of those dog shock collars around your neck. One little misstep, one wrong facial expression, one wrong word choice, and
Yep.
you're going to get shocked.
Yep. In a world where National Association of Realtors, and I put this out there because you will get this, put out a stat 2 years ago that they surveyed North Americans and found that 25% do not know who lives next door. We are a disassociated society, and yet abuse doesn't stop. They estimate 28% of all females will have some sort of abuse happen to them throughout their childhood, and that's what's reported. So we're creating the people who, like myself, like yourself, that will perpetuate because the baseline's been created. This is our value. So then we attract a partner that this is our value, and they have children, and then this is their value, and we keep perpetuating it. So at some point in time, people like yourself step up and say, "I'm going to write on this. I'm going to speak on this. I'm going to." Uh, be available to be a voice for this. How important do you believe an author's role? Because we understand that the authorship is authority. So author authority is is author is the core of authority.
Mhm.
And in order to get to stages, in order to speak on stages, how important is it for you? How important do you believe people who have impact messages like yours to become authors? And then let's talk about the challenges you faced in getting published.
Yeah, I think it's really important because for me, everybody receives information differently. So I think it's important. Some people like to read books. Some people like the audiobooks. Some people like to listen to podcasts. Some people like to see, YouTube. We were talking, before this program about YouTube and how prevalent that is. People are receiving sources of information everywhere. And so I think for me, when I first wrote the book, honestly, here's me in this little podunk town, like, oh, I'm just so excited to publish a book. Look at me finally publishing a book. Big achievement. Never thought I'd do it. Mark that off on the bucket list. I had no idea it was going to expand into all this. But what was happening was as like the reviews were being posted on Amazon, on Goodreads, people are reaching out to me saying, oh my gosh, it's like you've been in my house. Oh my gosh, I swear you wrote about my life. Like I was validating, so succinctly validating all of these people's experiences, and people were taking notice. So that's when I realized it couldn't just be one little book. I was even scared, honestly, talk about fear. I was a little nervous because I wanted some anonymity. And it's very hard to get that when you start being noticed. I was
Yeah.
grateful that the book did well, but I also didn't realize that it would. I just thought, I'm going to put out the book. I'm published. Yay, me. If one person gets saved because of this, great. Now it's like thousands and more thousands. And now it's a thing. And I'm still proud of that. But I'm more pleased that I have been able to have my own strength and find my own power in myself. It's been very healing for me, and it's strengthened me in my own journey to be able to stand up and say, yes, this happened. You can shame me, which, yes, there has been victim shaming. You can call me all kinds of things. I'm crazy. It never happened, whatever. I know what's what, and I'm going to stand for every other woman and man and child that has been through any aspect of what I've been through and say, if you have been through it, I believe you. I believe you. And I'm going to say it's not okay because you're right, we look at society. I mean, we all just watched this Diddy trial, and how horrific. I mean, I was appalled because every one of us that never achieved any justice was praying to God. We thought with all these awful atrocities they were, presented. There's evidence, there's witnesses, yet he's still getting off on most charges. And it's so discouraging. What do we think is going to happen now as a result? All these people that were hopeful that they might get justice, even if they were thinking about finally speaking up or thinking about finally leaving their relationship, now they're holding back. They're stepping back and saying, "Oh no, now I can't. I better not say anything because that might happen to me." And so somebody has to, and I'm not afraid anymore. And so I'm very proud that I'm able to kind of take the bull by the horns and be that voice for everybody.
Amazing. Yeah, and do you know the only person that's serving time for Epstein? The only person out of everybody that went to Lolita Island, out of everybody that they think, the only person who's serving time? Just
Yeah, I don't know.
the woman.
Who is it?
The woman.
Oh, a woman?
His partner is the only person, the woman is the only person that is serving time. Yes, she is culpable or culpable, whatever the word is. Yes, she is absolutely should be in jail.
It's
However, why is it only a woman in jail for all this? Right? So, but that's a whole nother show. And I'm going to have you back on my Kim Fox resilience because I really want to dive deeper into this. However, I'd like to continue on the author's journey. What was the biggest bottleneck for you getting published and getting the book out there?
I think for me, it was just it was me actually. Believing in myself, to really wrap my head around the fact that I had something worthy of giving the world, something that the world would receive, and would want to, because here I am. I think every author goes through this little, you almost have a little bit of imposter syndrome. Like you have this, big accomplishment, you have your manuscript, it's been content edited, copy edited, you're choosing graphics for the cover, and you're like, why am I doing this? I think we all do that. Why am I doing this? Does anybody care about anything I have to say with the millions of books? I mean, they say the average book only sells 250 copies. And, that's 80%. If you cover family and friends, you're like, okay, maybe a few more beyond that. Your friends tell their friends and everybody's being nice and trying to support you. But then what? Then what? And so even though I was okay with, not getting noticed and not getting attention, I just wanted to say one woman from the life I had. um it's been both humbling, bittersweet, and exciting, to see that there are so many people that are relating to it, that are jumping on this bandwagon, even if they haven't. And even like my husband now, I always joke that he's like the biggest girl's girl because he's, 6'5", 220, but he's at every event, with me, the book signings, the things, because he has two sisters and he's seen them go through some things with former marriages. And so he's out there rooting with us and, supporting and advocating, and I just love that.
That that is awesome. And it's life goals for a lot of people.
Yes.
So
Yes.
being present and being visible, even though it's uncomfortable because we're raised to be invisible.
Yes.
And yes, I get you. I get you. So I want to move into the reader's reward. We touched a bit about this, knowing that moment where people are reading and going, "I'm not alone. I'm not crazy." Right? And I think that's the biggest thing. And I think like other people like Brene Brown talks on the shame aspect. Shame
Oh,
story are doing so many things, right? Even the shame in parenting, right? I wish I wouldn't have done that. I wouldn't, and I have those issues. Everybody,
yeah.
any good parent has moments that they sit there, oh my God, I can't believe I did that. I should have done that better. But, and that's just because we're conscious. What other readers' rewards are there? What what is the value for the reader beyond that that I guess that connectivity or relatability through the story. What other rewards are in there?
Well, I'm hoping that when people read any of my books, but specifically Gasping for Air, um, that they're going to realize that they have the power in themselves, and they always have. They just have to tap into it to love themselves, or at least like themselves enough to change their mind about who they are and what they want out of life. And I think it makes the reader reflect really on, are they really happy? Are they really living a life that aligns with what they've always wanted for themselves? Or do they want to change their mind? Because I think so often we feel stuck. So I want people to change their mind, change their lives, and love themselves enough to create a life that is worth living.
That is really, really very I think that's where we're at in society. I think we've spent all this time building stuff, borrowing stuff, selling stuff, moving stuff, that now it's time to really address the human condition
Yeah,
and build better humans.
absolutely. That's our goal.
Um, you just said something that reminds me of one of my favorite lines in one of my favorite movies, being from Wichita, Kansas, The Wizard of Oz.
Ah,
And Glinda the Good Witch came down and she said when Dorothy was trying to get home, she said, "Oh, but my dear, the answer has always been within you." And I think that's really what you encapsulate is that the strength is within you. And
yeah,
if you need, read this book. If you need, reach out. If you need, here's a hand. If you need, here's a community. But the answers are within you.
absolutely.
So I'd like you to wrap up today's show with our 9 words, 3 sentences. When you read Gasping for Air, you will learn or discover so you can. Right to our audience. You can do those 3 sentences.
Absolutely. When you read Gasping for Air, you will learn that you have the power to decide who you are and what you want out of life so that you can live a fulfilling life that reflects exactly who you are and who you've always wanted to be.
Beautifully put.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dana. You are a rock star. And on behalf of my 5-year-old Kim, thank you.
You're
Thank you.
welcome.
For me, folks, that's it for today. But be sure to join us for all the upcoming amazing episodes that will showcase our everyday heroes that are making huge impact within local communities and people who just need to connect. Because that is what a good book is. Until next time, be sure to keep reading.